Hi, Layne. It's
Hi,
so exciting to have you here today.
thank you. Happy to be here.
So, I know you are a very successful entrepreneur who built up a really successful business and technology sector.
Yep.
And you are also a passionate horse rider, athlete, marathon runner. And as we were speaking before, you said you have been often called intense.
Yeah, it's the most common word people use to describe me, I would say, over my career, for sure.
And what does this intensity mean to you?
Well, I always equated it to energy and passion, right? I always just felt I'm intense because I care and I'm doing something important to me and I love it. And it took me some decades to realize that not everybody views it the same way, that some people are frightened by it, by some people just think it's a little over the top or that I must be just, doing that as a show. But it really is the real me. I mean, I really am very high energy. And especially when I'm moving in a direction that I want to go, you'll see all of that energy.
Yeah, and that's what actually for me the intensity is. It's this source of energy which is available and present within us. And yes, intense people are often noticed even when they are silent because the energy almost speaks for itself. And in
Yeah.
itself, it carries also certain responsibilities, such type of the impact.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yep. For sure.
And I know you had a very what many would call like traumatic event that happened during last year.
Yes.
I'm wondering how do you believe your relationship with intensity, your relationship with yourself has changed? Tell us more about that.
Sure. It was the start of the first race of the season in spring, April, and it was near my ranch. And I do endurance racing for horses, and I had a very high spirited 8-year old Arabian who really thought he could win the race, even though we were just starting. And he ended up falling over on my leg and shattering my right leg in about 10 pieces. I was immobile for about 5 months. I was bedridden for a month, and then I was able to use a walker. But a lot of the things I normally took for granted, and like walking and being able to carry things, I suddenly were just simply taken away from me. My horses still had to be cared for. Everything still had to happen, but it was not me who was going to do any of that. I had 2 surgeries to repair my leg, and I'm happy to report I'm doing very well now. However, during that time, it's interesting to think about my level of intensity. It's almost hard to admit this to myself, but I almost felt some sense of relief because now I could rest, and I did rest, and I rested a lot because I had to. And I had this really interesting source of gratitude from deep inside myself that said, you've done a lot and you kept pushing because you could. Now you can't. So you need to do this well, right? So you need to be just as intense, but in this vector, not in that vector. And so I did very well at resting. And I had a lot of people, because of my level of intensity, oh, I know it's so hard for you to lay still, and I can't believe you're sitting still. I'm like, no, it actually wasn't hard at all because I recognized it. And that's where I needed to put my intensity. So I would have to say, and I do tell people that I do believe I'm a better human being on the other side of this accident, because I think it brought me more to ground and focused with the various aspects of my intensity.
Mm. That is a very powerful story because I say we all exist in four worlds: mental, physical, emotional, and energetic, spiritual. And so often what I find, intense people might be particularly intense in one or might be another area and ignoring the other aspects of their being. And then that could lead to this disbalance between doing, being, thinking, and feeling.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
And how you described that actually you felt within yourself, it's like, wow.
It's a shift. It was a shift. I would say it was a shift from mental and physical to emotional and spiritual. It was a literal, like it was a break. It was, my leg broke, but also my body responded to that break in a way that I never could have predicted. It just shifted me out of physical and mental, right here, right now, do things, into rest, heal, recover, which is much, in my mind, much more spiritual and emotional. Because for me, the mindset was everything. I still existed. I still, am a being, but I'm a non-moving being for some time period, right? And I needed to focus my energy on that, even the physical aspects of that. Of course, I had to look it up, because what else did I have to do? Is my body was burning 25% more calories just to heal. And that was with me laying, doing nothing in bed, laying down. So it was quite an experience for me, for sure.
Wow. And you mentioned even before we went live, how actually your body needed that rest already
Yes.
before the accident, and you were ignoring it.
It's true. I had several friends say to me, the universe has been talking to you for some time. This time it smashed you, so you have to listen. And I thought about that a lot while I was, lying still, resting. And I think they're right. I really do. I think I had pushed for a long time. I had just kept going. And I know, my father was very ill when I was young, and he would always say, if you can, you should. And I took that to heart, but I think I took that a little too much to heart. And I think what I missed was you also need to rest in order to make that a whole. And so I was completely out of balance, I would say.
Yeah. And of course, rest day is a training day, and it's about listening to those signals, right? It's about being aware of different aspects of our being.
Yep, it's true.
Because when this toxic intensity or destructive intensity gets in, it's when we get into this pushing energy, right?
Yeah.
That's what there is, like something to prove, even if we might be connected to the purpose. So tell me more about what changed also in your emotional world, because you, as I understand, you're a master of controlling your emotions and putting them in different compartments. How
Yeah.
this experience reflected in this world?
That was really hard at first, because I wanted to not be a burden, but I can't do anything. So how is it possible for me to not be a burden? Well, I'll tell you how it's possible. The people around me didn't see me as a burden. They wanted to help. So what I realized was, by me allowing their help, which I needed, was also giving them a gift, right? A gift to give me, love and support when I needed it. And they had always given me love and support, but the amazing, husband that I have, and my family, it was incredible. In fact, I was telling you, the story about my little grandchildren babysitting me when my husband needed to leave. So my little grandchildren, would make me lunch and, bring me food and all that, which was great. And I think great for them, because they learned how important it was to help me. Another thing that, was really hard on me was knowing that I wasn't going to be able to work with or do anything with, even feed my horses. And I have quite a few, because we raise them, we breed them. And so there was a moment where I said, I need, especially the horse who was young and, very good, I needed him to be ridden. So I called my friend and said, and I knew she was down a horse and she didn't have one to ride for the whole season. And I said, how about you take him this season and you ride him? And she said, you can't be serious, because this is a very well-bred and good horse. And I said, what am I going to do with him? I can't do anything. So she ended up bringing him up to fitness and, riding him several races this last summer. And she's doing it again this year because I felt like she needed one more year just to be able to have a great experience with him. And, when I told her this, she started to cry. I started to cry because to know that he was being taken care of by someone who cared about him and was going to use him to his potential helped me take some of the stress off of me. And in my opinion, made me more capable to recover. So I think just recognizing the gratitude that is there in some of these partnerships that we have is hugely critical.
Yeah. And your ability to feel joy for the success of another as well.
So exciting. And I did have a lot of people say, oh, I bet it's really hard for you to watch her do all that. I'm like, it is so not hard. It is so fun and exciting. And I just think it's great. And part of it is that I was getting tired anyway. And this is what we were talking about, where, right? I was tired before the wreck. I was tired. I kept thinking, what am I doing? I'm tired. And I think it was just trying to put too much on that physical and mental self and not taking into account the emotional and spiritual. And I'm having so much fun being her crew and her groom. And, I'll drive her to the races this year and we're just going to have a great time. And guess what? I'm not racing and it's good.
Yeah. And it's allowing yourself to actually connect with these emotions, being present for your grandchildren, for success of another. It's such a powerful story. And I'm wondering, because you are still at the realm of your business.
Yep.
And you probably had to take time off. What impact, I'm wondering, have it had on your business? Because I know so many leaders who behave and believe that they need to be always involved, right? And even if they're like, look, but I'm delegating, Tatiana, already. Well, are you delegating enough if you're so exhausted? Well, the business needs it. It's like somebody needs to be there, how, and here's this thing happens. So what was the impact? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, it's actually pretty fascinating and I love it. But I had recently, we have a second level of leadership, kind of a council that we have with the vice presidents who can sign for the company and whatnot. And they just picked up the ball and sprinted with it. I'm not even going to say ran. They just went and they did all the things that needed to be done. And I literally didn't have to worry about anything. And oh, by the way, we improved our revenue 36% last year. So what does that tell you? I don't even know what to say. It's like, oh, wow. So, by me being there to guide them, and I certainly could talk on the phone. And so being there to guide them, but allow them to do all the things that needed to be done without me necessarily needing to be, kind of the left and right boundary. It was great. And it moved people more quickly, perhaps into a position where they were making decisions and doing, things of that authority level. And yet they were prepared and they were ready and they were up for the task. And it was really, again, wonderful to watch.
So actually it's empowered people in your team to literally step into their leadership.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
And what an amazing outcome that it led to the growth of 36% of revenues.
Right. Oh yeah. So, yeah. And so that, the trick for me now is, now that I'm back and, able, is, how much do I work? Right. And actually, because they're doing such a great job and we've hired, several new people since then who are just doing outstanding work. And what I've decided is I pulled up a level and I'm working more at the strategic level, right? So I'm looking a year out, 6 months in a year, and the tactics and the operational from the day to day, they nailed. So they've got that figured out. And I don't need to worry about that until, or unless I get pulled in, which is fine. And it works so well. I think, we're doing great, fun things.
And that is really amazing, because what the leaders at the realm need the most is to take step out so that A, they can keep the perspective on the business, and B, they have the time for strategy, time for thinking, time for feeling what is actually there might be observing, right?
Yeah. And we had spun out another company right before my accident. And so that company I ended up putting some energy into to help, kind of get that one going. And, there's plenty of work for everybody. And, I do agree. I am no longer an individual contributor, and I need to act as such. And it's just that simple, right? I am leadership position. I need to be doing that strategy level, especially with some of the things that we're trying to do right now. My best energy, which also, to your point, Tatiana, is feeling, because I have such a honed gut instinct at this point, having done this for so long. I had to some degree stopped listening to it, right? So now I feel much more empowered. I feel much more balanced is probably the best word, with, kind of all the 4 realms that we talked about earlier.
Right. So basically, actually, you stepping out of this physical doing allowed you to be more connected with this intuition, with this balance, empower others, and
Yes.
empower self. It sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I tell people, and I probably said it already, I'm a better human being on the other side of this accident for all kinds of reasons. I mean, and a lot of it is, just because, I realize I'm not in control, and, my body is incredibly capable of a lot of things, to include this massive recovery, and it is doing so well. I'm 6 months ahead of my schedule per my orthopedic surgeon, which is great. And all of that because, all of the things I had used previously aren't forgotten. They're just that energy is being directed in a different place, right? So my discipline, which from my earlier training and frankly business, is now being used in a different way. My discipline is now, don't work so much. Discipline yourself to pull back. Discipline yourself to remember to put your walks every day. You have to do them for your recovery. So don't schedule something over that kind of thing.
Right. It's like a discipline. It's powerful. Discipline to pull back. Discipline to remember about time of the recovery. Right.
Right.
And so for me, you see, when intensity goes into this toxic, destructive ways, it's often driven by some type of fear, and this fear is either we are conscious about it, or we might be not conscious about it, and everyone has their unique version. Like for some, it's like fear. Oh my gosh, if I'm not needed, what happens then? So that might be fear of and its results as pleasing. For some others, it might be, if I'm not in control, things will fall apart. So that's, like in over controlling behaviors can become more hypervigilance. So now when you reflect on your experience, how would you relate to when you might have been before, or we can sleep at any time in a thought or destructive versions?
I had a 1,000-pound horse step on my leg, and I lived, and I'm better for it. So you know what? That just took a lot of fear away from me. And the reality is, we're never the things that are going to impact the most, we can't prepare for, we can't plan for, we don't know what those are going to be, whether that's an illness or an injury or a death of a colleague or friend or family. We just can't see that coming. So instead of focusing on the fear of what might be, if I make a bad decision, what might happen, instead of focusing on the fear aspect of that, I do what I call calculated risk, which is I'm an engineer, so I'm going to go through analysis and examples, but there's usually only a finite number of realistic scenarios. I'm not going to focus on any weird corner cases, because those are frightening and probably very low probability, right? So I try to think about it in that way. And I try to focus my energy on what is the best decision, and recognizing that in some cases, in lots of cases, making a decision that's reasonably calculated and thoughtful is better than no decision, because I do know that all of the data will never come. Period. End of story. So if I wait for everything to come in so I can make the best decision, that's one of the biggest mistakes I could ever do. So after accident, I'm now much faster at making decisions. I'm much more effective, I think, in being able to push down decisions that don't need to be made by me. Like, why are you asking me? You guys know what to do. That kind of thing. You don't want me to weigh in on this. And I think, the fear has just gone away. I'm 100% comfortable being totally uncomfortable. And I think that is actually, to me, freedom and success, right? I'm not saying I make decisions that are perfect, not in it by any stretch. I'm just saying I make decisions effectively. And I'm willing to pivot once we get more information, right?
Yeah, it's rather than going for perfect decision, go for a decision, realizing that we're actually not in control of what is going to happen, right? So
Right.
and that we are capable and have the resources needed or have access to resources needed through asking for help, through empowering others to deal with whatever going to come our way.
Right. And if I can balance that intensity, which I know I have, into a more balanced, sort of this strategic and empowering for others intensity, then I will have done what I need to do, in my opinion. So, this is what I'm learning, and with your help, of course, it's just been great to remind myself that it's not just physical, right? I was still, a human being while I was incapable of walking, right? And so sometimes I just have to remind myself that whatever I thought reality was isn't the whole story.
Right. So it's like it's actually opening the perspective as well. So and
Right.
and this balance, like on one hand, inviting others to step into their own power,
That's it.
and yet don't get lost. That sounds like in a forest of slowing the of well, on one hand it's important to slow down, but on the other hand it's like about endless discussions. So it's just like inspiring also your team to make fast decisions.
Exactly. And I think, I'm also looking at the chat. Thank you, Barbara. The question isn't, I mean, it's not that I don't weigh in, it's that I'm a safety net, right? So it might come to me for final approval, but the reality is, they are more than capable of making a lot of the decisions themselves. And I think, we get to a point with the growth of the business where some decisions just need to be made at the lower levels, and they just do. And those decisions, I don't need to weigh in, in certain cases. But I think recognizing all of that, and also always having an open door where if somebody needs me to weigh in, I absolutely will. I'm a safety net, and I will take the full brunt of, the bad decision for sure.
Yeah. And creating space of listening and connecting
Yes.
to different
In a
perspectives.
safe environment, right? Safe environment to challenge and to question and to say, I'm not sure I understand why you're doing that, that kind of thing, which is great. Now, I'm in certain decisions, I'm going to always ask and listen, and I might not change my mind, which is fine, right? And that's part of having that mutual respect. And, again, that's where the intensity for me comes in to some degree, right? Because, I think we all need to recognize that some decisions, all decisions are made at certain levels, right? I think some leaders try to hold on to all decisions, and I think that's a mistake.
Yes, and that's when slowing down is so important, even slowing down to understand for what purpose are you holding up to all decision? What are you trying to prove? Because for me, that's when we're going into destructive version of intensity, when we're coming from this energy of when we're trying something to prove and we are not even aware of that. So it's like moving to that, look, I don't understand something and there is nothing to prove.
Yeah,
That
that's true. So kind of
so,
disassociating from ego to some degree.
yes. And I noticed that you said that there are some questions from the audience because I don't see them. So
Oh,
if you see the question from the audience, please feel free to read
yeah,
it.
sorry. Barbara said, explain more on why you don't want to weigh in and allow them to decide.
Right.
So,
Okay. So that's what you answered that question. Yeah, that's a very powerful advice for leaders. So Layne, do you know, that obviously was a very hard event that happened, and it's so tempting to go into judging those types of events. You know, and I see leaders also arguing with reality. Tell us more about your relationship. How do you perceive it, the event that happened to you from the point of view of disappointment, or
Mm.
is it something different?
Yeah, that's a good question. Of course I was disappointed, but I can't shake the fact that the number one feeling I felt was relief. Relief I wasn't injured worse. Relief I knew I could fix myself. Relief that I had family to support me, and relief that I knew, everybody would, do what needed to be done to keep things going. Um, I, I mean, I was disappointed, but I was also, for some reason, I just really embraced the journey. I didn't really like having a broken leg, but, I embraced the fact that, I really do think the universe was trying to tell me something I hadn't listened, for the last couple of
Mm.
years. And so, this time I was 100% focused on hearing what was being told to me.
Mm. That's so important, because of course it's important to acknowledge those feelings of disappointment, and you mentioned before we went live, grief, almost grief for your
Oh,
previous.
yeah. I did. Yeah. Thank you for reminding me. I did, certainly, especially when the pain was the worst. And when the doctor said, you'll probably never do this again or that again. I did have to grieve. I did allow myself, which I think we all should do, is to grieve for my lost self, right? I'm a new person. I have new, strengths and capabilities now, but I did lose some things. I did. And, part of me, I don't know if I'll ever be able to go back to racing like I had done before. I simply don't know. But I'm okay. Right. And so once I acknowledge that grief, and, kind of here's the real crazy point. I'm not only okay, but I may even be better.
Right. And that's, Layne, it's so important to realize, right? Uh,
Mhm.
it's acknowledging what's happened, acknowledging the feelings, and also through gratitude and through opening the mind and perspective on how
Mhm.
you became connected
Yeah.
to all four aspects of your existence.
Yes. Yeah, I think, and I'm a kind of a female in a male dominated, business world. And I think a lot of times I tended to shut down my emotional, just from the sheer fact of, I thought it was the right thing to do. But what I realized, and I, of course, always realized, but I never really held it as dearly as I do now, is that is a very important strength for me, is to be able to have that connection and to be able to have that come and play. Now, that's not to say I'm going to be emotional in, meetings, et cetera, but it does need to weigh in as decisions are made and things are said. And you said it earlier, a lot of times when I meet in some of the meetings, I do a lot of work with the military, and a lot of times I might be the only female in the room, and I don't speak much, but I'll tell you what, when I do, everybody listens. So there's a certain amount of balance there that, like you said, my energy is probably red, and, I'm just, I am who I am, and
Yeah.
there it
And
is.
it's have this ability also to take a step back and
Mhm.
listen to the signals that the body sends to you, that your
Mhm.
emotions send to you, and actually being able to ask for help, how
Yes.
rewarding it is to people who give you help. Wow,
Yes.
it's really rewarding.
Yes.
And
Yes. Yes, I had never needed help at this level in my entire life. And it was unbelievably rewarding to get it and to receive it and to be grateful for it and to acknowledge it and to just have it. I don't even know what to say. I have a picture of my little granddaughter. She liked to put lotion on my leg, and she's holding a little flower, and and I'm just like, oh my gosh, that's why I healed so quickly.
right. And so often, women don't ask for help in business, so
No?
often, and in life, so often accomplished women in leadership positions feel that they need to do it all themselves, or like they need to push through. At some point, you use that language as well,
Yeah.
right?
Oh
And
yeah. Yes.
how
Yes.
did it empower your team to
Yeah.
generate actually improvements, like 36% growth. That's
I know. I know. We just got another question. Thank you, Barbara. Does your intensity make you more persuasive? I would say, that's a really interesting question. I would say maybe not more persuasive, but more trustable. I think people would trust me because I am passionate about what I'm doing, and I usually have the background data to support it, or I wouldn't be so direct. But maybe that comes together, right? Because even in some cases where I don't necessarily get the outcome that I would have been pushed for, it's usually done with very high level of mutual respect, and I can understand why they don't agree. But I never really thought about that. Maybe it does. Maybe it does.
Well, the research does say that when women advocating for something or for someone, they actually negotiate better deals. So
Interesting.
when you show up
Yeah.
passion, yes, it helps to be more heard, as long as we don't get into this tunnel vision of my way or highway. And
Stomp my feet and start to yell. Yeah, I'm not usually do that.
and obviously you are aware of that very much. So that has been such a powerful conversation. I really enjoyed being in the room with you. Thank you, Layne.
Thank you.
So where can leaders find you?
Our website is www.willowview.us, or of course you can find me on LinkedIn, Layne Lewis.
Yes,
Love to chat with more people. Barbara, reach out. Sounds like we could have a really good conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone who listened and will listen later.